The Stories He Tells, The Story of Joseph Bruchac by James Bruchac, illustrations by Brennan Kearney. Joseph Bruchac III was born on October 16, 1942. He was born in Saratoga Springs, New York. His parents' names were Joseph Jr. and Marion Flora Bowman. Joseph grew up in Greenfield Center, New York, that is in the foothills of the Adirondack Mountains. Joseph in second grade. Joseph was raised by his mother's parents. His grandfather was Abenaki Indian. He had a strong love for animals and nature. His grandmother was one of the first women to ever graduate from Albany Law School. She liked books and learning. Albany Law School. Joseph's grandparents ran a small general store and gas station right next to the house where he grew up. The store was on one of the main roads into the Adirondack Mountains. As a boy, Joseph loved to hear all of the stories and tall tales that told by the people who came into the store. Joseph's family general store. There were not many children out in the country where Joseph lived. Because of this, he often played by himself in the forest. Sometimes he would walk by Grandpa Jesse's side. Grandpa Jesse taught Joseph a lot about animals, nature, and gardening. He never spoke much about his Native American background. Grandpa Jesse and his family and other Native Americans had been treated badly. Joseph and his grandfather. Grandpa Jesse said he left school when he was in fourth grade. Why? He was being called mean names. Hearing such family stories made Joseph feel sad. It also made him want to learn more. He wanted to learn the stories and traditions his grandfather was too ashamed to share. Joseph's grandmother passed on to him a love of school. With this, Joseph went to college at Cornell University. While in college, he began to learn everything he could learn about Native American ways and beliefs. As an adult, Joseph traveled the country meeting Native American elders. These elders gladly shared their stories and traditions with him. Cornell University. Joseph and his wife Carol met in college. They married and had two sons named James and Jesse. Joseph was overflowing with stories that he would often retell to his two sons. Before long, Joseph began to share the stories with others outside the family. Times had changed a lot since Grandpa Jesse left school. Now, when Joseph told the stories, people listened and were interested. They felt Joseph's retellings were important. They respected him. Joseph also began to write stories in books. Joseph sharing stories. In just a few years, Joseph Bruchac became known all across the world as a Native American storyteller. He has won many awards for his storytelling. Joseph has also written more than 120 books of poetry, fiction, and nonfiction. Most of the books are about Native Americans. Joseph connects with audiences around the world. Growing up, learning about Native American traditions, James and Jesse are also storytellers. Joseph's oldest son, James, is also a wilderness and tracking expert. His younger son, Jesse, teaches the Abenaki language. James at work, James, Jesse, and Joseph Bruchac. Joseph still lives in the house where he grew up. He writes and shares stories almost every day. He takes extra pride in seeing a love for stories continue to his grandchildren. He and his sons continue to help pass along these once hidden traditions to future generations. Joseph and his children.